It was an absolutely huge weekend of news regarding Apple, thanks to Mark Gurman, who released a ton of news on new products, etc. So we're going to break it all down. We got news from iPhone to MacBook Pro to iMac to 6K display and more. And I'm also going to give my final defense of the MacBook Pro's Touch Bar. Be sure to hit the subscribe button and click the bell so you don't miss as we cover your favorite tech and video games. It's the Granted Geek Show. Okay, so starting off with Apple's big seller, the iPhone, we have reports that are saying that it's going to be an S release. And I'm sure you know, if you're watching this video, that S releases are typically focused on improving the speed and performance rather than any design changes. Now, I'm all in for this decision, and you should be too, as the Apple iPhone 12 design is perfect. They really struck gold with the iPad Pro when they had this design with the rounded corners on the screen and the squared off design. They're really implementing this look and feel across all of their devices. We'll have more on that later. We're already starting to see a trend where Apple goes from rounded edges with something like the original iPhone, just more squared off edges with the iPhone 4, 5, 5S, to rounded again with the 6 onward, and then squaring it again with the iPhone 12. So seeing as we're only a year into this new squared off edge design, I don't think we'll be seeing any changes to the form factor. It's also being reported that Apple is working on an iPhone Fold, a device that will go from iPhone in form to tablet in form. And let me say, with the current iPhone being 6.7 inches, if you imagine that folded out, you're pretty close to your 12-inch iPad at that point. But regardless of what the screen size ends up being, I think Apple's going to knock this out of the park. We know of other Samsung devices that have pioneered and are pioneering that foldable technology, but what Apple is known for doing is not necessarily being first to come out with a new technology. If Apple does it, it means they believe in it, and typically when Apple believes this is the way that tech is heading, the rest of the industry tends to follow. I think an iPhone Fold is going to be like nothing we've ever seen, while at the same time it's going to push up against that iPad Pro market. And then if you've got an iPhone that can open up into an 8 to 10 inch tablet, would it be getting the X version of the A series chips like the iPad and iPad Pro get? Or would they keep it on that lower performance tier chip like the iPhones currently have? I would imagine it would need a little more power, at least to power a bigger display. Now, moving on to the MacBook Pros, it's reported that there's going to be a screen increase, not for the 16 inch, but for the 13 inch that people have been crying for the longest time to get an increase, a bump, a spec bump, and a bezel reduction, increasing that screen real estate to 14 inches. Now, in addition to having rounded off cornered screens like the iPad Pro, the new MacBook Pros are supposed to come with the M1X chip, and that's not really news. That's something we've speculated about and there's been information on for weeks now. These displays are also supposed to be brighter and possibly come with micro LED, which is kind of a hybrid between regular LCD or IPS displays and OLED, where instead of having individually lit pixels that can turn off and on to create perfect blacks, they have local dimming zones. Those zones that serve as the light source for several pixels, they will be dimming and brightening to give you that semi-OLED experience. Combine this with the return of MagSafe from older Macs and the removal of the Touch Bar, which we'll get into in a second, it seems that Apple's just looking at what their customers want and just doing exactly what they want, which I've always felt Apple has struck a balance in between. Apple is the kind of company that wants to give you what you don't know that you want, while at the same time, when those complaints get louder and louder, like MagSafe, like the removal of Touch Bar, and the 14-inch screen, it's just too loud to ignore. Now, when it comes to the Touch Bar, I think it should stay, and the reason is not for Touch Bar's sake, but rather this is the way that Apple was communicating with its user base on how to implement touch into the Mac. Tons and tons of professionals and regular folk alike would love to see touch implemented on a Mac, a MacBook Pro, or any Mac for that matter, and this was their way of gauging the audience on what things worked and what didn't work. So yes, the Touch Bar, the strip, love it or hate it. I don't see why you would hate it, as you could easily turn it back into the function keys, and then it would basically become like an iPhone, and we're kind of already used to typing on something like that. So it's not like the entire keyboard is a touch screen. And of course, I don't have all workflows, right? So I do photo and video editing, music production, and schoolwork. But the function row, for me at least, was not something that was unbearable, and I understood its purpose. But now we're taking a step backwards, as once again, there will be no touch on any Mac, period. There, I've said it, I rest my case. Now, moving on to the new iMac news, of course, we're going to see the same iPad Pro. I told you guys this was going to be a theme we would see in all these devices, is they struck gold with the design of the new iPads, the iPad Pros, and now they're implementing it in everything, even down the tier of iPads to even the iPad Air, the iPad Air 4. So yes, that design was carried through to the iPhone. Now we're seeing it's carried through to the MacBook Pros, and yes, it's going to be carried through to the iMac. Now, there are new screen sizes here as well reported, apparently a 24-inch and a 30-inch, increasing screen sizes from the 21 and the 27-inch, both 3 inches, and shrinking those bezels down. Hopefully we get a little chin reduction for the iMac as well. Now, the iMac is interesting because it's always been a device that has really blurred the line between consumer and professional, really the definition of a prosumer's device. So with that being said, will we get an M1XX? We don't want to do 3Xs. That could send the wrong message, but at least an M1X beefier version, possibly with more cores and possibly external graphics support, or at least a ramped up version of the graphics card, as many people use the iMac as their daily driver prosumer device. Next up, we have news of a lower price 6K display. Really, it'll be a 5K and maybe a 4K display, but it will share that same design, nano textured glass as an add-on feature, same rotating stand, all that goodness, HDR, all the specs besides the resolution from the 6K Apple display. Many people weren't willing to spend thousands on thousands on thousands of dollars for the Apple 6K display, but maybe something coming in at $43.99 for the 5K version and maybe $2,900 or $3,500 for the 4K version. Apple is really pushing high dynamic range, Dolby Vision, even implementing it in their new iPhones. So for creators to really be able to take advantage of this new technology, at least on the prosumer level, they're going to need access to displays that let them see that. And while the iPhone really is an incredible display now, it's just not big enough, and maybe we'll see micro LED implemented into the new iPad Pros, and that will allow, prosumers to maybe get a better idea of what they're working with color-wise and with HDR. But until then, the iMac 6K display is still the standard, the gold standard, the holy grail of being able to consume and create HDR high-resolution content. Now finally, the Mac Pro, the big boy, the cheese grater. Now it's reported that there will be 2 versions coming out, one built on Intel that retains the same form factor as the current gen, and then a new generation built on Apple's M1 chips, maybe an M1XX, a device that truly shows us the pinnacle of Apple computing. Everything, all the bells and whistles, from form factor to performance. I think it's going to trounce the Intel version, even the new version that comes out either this year or 2022. That'll kind of be Apple's last thank you to the Intel users, but saying, look, you got to get with the program. The M1 Mac Pro is supposed to be cube-like, much like the Power Mac G4. While they want to go smaller, they want to stay as far away from cylinders, trash can type shapes as possible. Now, of course, both of these devices are going to be powerhouses, but I don't really see how you can improve that much on the current gen Mac Pro Tower as far as Intel is concerned, besides implementing their new Intel chips. Whew. And so that does it. That is all of the news that we got over the weekend regarding Apple and their new product releases. Let me know what you're most excited for down in the comments below. I'm happy to chat it up with you guys as always. In the meantime, be sure to check out the channel. I've got a lot of content. I do tech and video games. This is also a network, so we've got several different creators doing several different shows, several different genres. It's a lot of fun, so be sure to check us out. Also, we're on Patreon now, so if you'd like to support the channel, be sure to check that out in the links down below. Like, subscribe, and click the bell so that you don't miss more content. Thanks so much for watching. It's the Geek Show.